David, the Justice Department takes center stage in some of these appointments that Donald Trump has offered up. And the Matt Gaetz appointment, he would be the Attorney General of the United States. That is something that has brought the ire of many, even Republicans, who have commented on this. I wonder, you have actually worked in the Justice Department. Tell me what's involved as Attorney General and how Matt Gaetz might fit into this entire thing.
Well, a couple of things. He has no prospect of being confirmed by the Senate. They made John Thune the Senate Majority Leader, leader of the Republicans. He's a moderate to conservative guy. He has no intention of getting his caucus there, 52 or 53 Republicans, to approve, to advise and consent on Gaetz. What's going on with Gaetz is that Gaetz was looking for what he considered a graceful exit from the House of Representatives before a scathing ethics report was delivered against him. It was scheduled to come out this Friday, but they only have jurisdiction and sway over members. So by becoming an ex-member, he hopes to delay or maybe even stifle that report. I think it's going to leak out anyway. And as I say, it's going to be damning. Going through alleged sex trafficking with him, by him with a 17-year-old, improper conduct on the floor of the Senate, being involved in various scams. There's a huge scammer down there who said that Gaetz was his wingman, did all these crimes with him. You have to always take these snitches, who want to get out of jail sooner or get out of jail free with a grain of salt. I get it as a federal criminal defense attorney. But Gaetz is in a world of trouble. He's also unswervingly loyal to Trump. So he went to Trump and said, look, I need a favor. Help me exit gracefully from the House. So he took this big job, and because he's taking this big job, he can't be a congressman anymore, for goodness sake. But the whole thing, it was the tail wagging the dog. It was all him trying to get out of the House of Representatives before that ethics report was publicly disclosed on Friday. Now, as to this ruse that he's really going to be the Attorney General, there's two ways they might accomplish this. Trump was pushing for this guy, Rick Scott, who had his own federal criminal investigatory problems, but he survived them. His companies paid enormous fines, and he became a United States Senator from the state of Florida. And he wanted to be the majority leader, and they started this talk that he would give recess appointments to whoever Trump wanted to send up there, which meant that there would be no advice and consent first. There would be an appointment first. So after January, the Republicans will be back in control of the Senate. It's up to them then, Mark, whether to take a recess. If they take a recess even over a weekend, during that recess, because we need to get on with the MAGA agenda, we need to do these things, Trump would parade around that he needed someone in there right away to manage the Department of Justice, and that would be Gaetz, and he would make this recess appointment. And then when the Senate gets back in session, they can deal with the fact that there's no longer a recess, and here's this guy appointed. But they have to go through a fair amount of work and effort and consensus to get him out at that point. So the whole recess appointments was to put these unbelievably awful, unconfirmable people on there. Now, the Senate would have to give up. They'd have to abdicate a lot of their power. And you're from Washington, D.C. These guys and gals don't spend their whole careers to become 6-year term senators to have little power. They like very much to reward their friends and punish their enemies. And so if you're an enemy of a senator, they have all these things that you never advance politically. They don't want to give up that power to Trump, where the whole criterion is going to be if you're a friend or enemy of Trump. They want it to be if you're a friend or enemy of the senators. So I don't see the senators giving up that power. I don't see them allowing a recess appointment. One thing they can do is they can stay in session. They can technically stay in session, and then there isn't technically a recess, and then there can't be a recess appointment. One last thing, this issue has gone up to the U.S. Supreme Court on the theory that, wait a second, the Constitution says clearly it is the exclusive role of the Senate to advise and consent on these key appointments, like to the cabinet. But the question would be, Mark, who would have standing to raise it? A bunch of advocacy groups might be denied standing in the federal courts. Maybe the Democrats But the argument would be, look, you don't have any right to advise and consent. There's only 48 of you. It's the 58 Republicans' rights who are being abrogated here. So it might be hard to find somebody to actually raise it. But this will be a fight between the moderate to conservative Republicans who now hold the Senate under John Thune and Trump. And I think bet on Thune for this one. So bottom line, he's not going anywhere. He's the deep state got me. This was so unfair. There's all of these, what do they call them? Republicans in name only who are in the Senate. They stopped me. I was going to de-weaponize the Department of Justice. Of course, the fear that everyone has is that he would actually weaponize. This is the projection. Trump and Gaetz are always saying, Biden weaponized the Department of Justice. The truth is just the contrary. They hope to weaponize the Department of Justice against their enemies. I don't think the Republican Senate will stand for this man ever. If you want to talk about his own peccadillos and worse, we can get into Gaetz's. There's one last thing, Mark. I'll let you talk. But Kim and I go way back, and I'm sure you do on your program, because we all remember when Gaetz was under federal criminal investigation for what was going on with this 17-year-old young woman. And was he sex trafficking her? Was he just taking her across state lines for his own personal sexual purposes, which is not the guideline? Usually it has to be commercial. It has to be various people who are transported across state lines. But my goodness, it's not a good look to have the defense. I didn't really do it commercially. I just did it for my own personal pleasure.
Right,
and I didn't do it with lots of women. I just did it with a couple of women. Not a great look. And before we got worried about you getting demonetized, on Pat's show, they always played "Young Girl, Get Out of My Mind."
Yeah, the old Gary Bucket number. He clearly has a thing for young women, and he's a frat boy who's sort of run amok. I was saying earlier, you'll recall, he was showing pictures to other Congress people on the floor of the House of women he'd been with. He's not, he's not exactly very high-minded when it comes to serving the people, but he is slavishly serving that president-elect, Donald Trump, and that's sort of how he ends up here. And as you say, I guess he was just thrown a bone by Trump to kind of give him cover, you're saying, to get out of this ethics investigation and the revelations. Now to the other, I want to be clear on what you just said, and I want to get to the other nominations. Are you saying that for the other nominations that have other issues, like Pete Hegseth at DOD, Tulsi Gabbard, whatever, are you saying that they likely won't allow? I mean, I understand you're just handicapping here. I mean, you're kind of Katz-Adamising this. They will not allow recess appointments for them either?
Well, you could take the one on Gaetz to the bank. Hegseth, it's really interesting. I've been on Fox, including been on Fox on the weekend. And that Fox show is right near Union Station in Washington, D.C. You probably know that area very well down there. And I sat there with Laura Ingraham, and I sat there with some of the presenters. And I have to say, as I looked across the table, I didn't agree with some of the Fox hosts, but I did not imagine that one of the two or three of us in that studio on the weekend was going to command the largest military in the history of the planet. It is so extraordinary. They're usually four-star generals. They're people who've done a fantastic job in the military. They've, organized things. There's over 1 million people in the military. There's an enormous budget. And I think that the Republican senators will say, he could be a White House aide if that's what you really want him for. Those people don't have to be confirmed by the Senate. But I think they'll say with him that it's a bridge too far. He is nice looking. They say about Gaetz that he's had all that Botox. But, when they write the history of the decline and hopefully not the fall of the American empire, it will have been done under Trump by nice looking people. And
that's exactly right. And I mean,
he's a nice looking person, isn't he? That's what you could say, to be the commander of all of our military forces as the head of the Department of Defense. He's a nice looking person.
That is what Trump likes. I mean, we mention these things that are superficial, but Trump is a one-dimensional guy, and the superficiality actually serves that president. So I don't think you're wrong to point to that. He likes the way the guy looks and sounds, and he, of course, he supports Trump. I was saying it as well. I mean, you know, this guy, you know, can't manage a kid's birthday party, and you're going to put him in charge of, you know, managing the Pentagon and
Did you see Colbert? Mark, 5 years ago, he's interviewed, and Colbert has the clip. And he says on Fox, this is a public show going out to the nation. He says, you know, one thing about me is that I haven't washed my hands in the last 10 years. Now, I thought this has to be parody. Where did Colbert get this thing? But apparently it's a real thing. So if he does get the post, Mark, and any of your listeners, viewers ever have a chance to shake his hand, don't.
So when it comes to the legal cases against Donald Trump, they all evaporate, except Kim was telling us today that the Georgia case is continuing. Kim, weren't you saying that Fani Willis is actually intending to continue this case?
That is her intent. She was reelected to her job, and she says, now, mind you, Trump isn't the only suspect or you know, defendant in this case. And so she'll move forward with the case, even if she says she has to push a pause on Trump and wait to prosecute him for 4 years until he's out of office.
That case has been, I think, indefinitely suspended by the state appellate courts. Now, after it gets suspended, it may spring back to action. They're certainly going to say that the prosecution of Trump down there is barred by presidential immunity. And I've said this before, but one of the things that's scary for our republic and our democracy is that the U.S. Supreme Court decision rendered last summer about presidential immunity makes a president, even after serving, immune for anything that they do while they were president. And the logic of it is that you can't just have the 50 states, right, bring those criminal suits against a president and say, oh, now we protected presidential immunity because the federal government can't do it. The reading of that, especially by this U.S. Supreme Court, would be that it also affects the states. So what does that mean? That means there's presidential immunity for official acts that Trump took while he was the president before. And he was still the president up until January 20th, 2021. So when he makes the phone call into Georgia and says, hey, just find me another 11,000 votes, meaning concoct me 11,000 votes, that's something he did while he was president last time. The argument is that it was not an official act because the president has no role in state elections, even of himself. Boy, I think that's going to be a thin read on the for this U.S. Supreme Court. So I think that basically on that lawsuit, on that criminal prosecution, she is suspended. Even if they say she can go forward. Remember, there's this whole issue of whether she can go forward or whether she should have been recused.
Because of her relationships, yeah.
And so I think the case may be in suspension. But I think what Fani Willis is going to do is she's going to play her cards as long as she can. And until courts tell her you have to suspend. She won again in a landslide. This lawsuit, this criminal action is popular in the area she represents, Fulton County. And I think that she'll feel like she has to play it out until the courts say either your case is suspended or you can no longer be on it. If she can no longer be on it, somebody else from her office will grab it. Or if she has the authority, she'll pick a special prosecutor down there, not the one she picked last time. And they will run with the ball as long as they can. Now, maybe in a perfect world, if you want Trump and his Department of Justice and the FBI not to be vindictive and retaliatory under his command, maybe it would be better if everyone stepped down, right? If everyone stepped aside from these prosecutions. But there's no real way to arrange that. So I think she'll proceed ahead. I think that Trump will, if he does one thing in the justice system, is try to retaliate against her. There are ways that he can try to retaliate against her, those scary ones, audit her taxes, do all those kinds of things, put her under some surveillance that's going to be hard to prove, trying to catch her doing something and then say, oh, no, this wasn't selective prosecution. You did something. You went through the traffic light at 70 miles an hour, and you shouldn't have done that. And the fact that we followed you every single place that you went, every time that you went anywhere, you're still not supposed to drive through a stop sign, are you? So, there's that kind of thing. And there's the other thing that they've had to be in federal court. So one of the things that obviously they'll try to use to intimidate her and that her counselors have to be telling her is that some of these matters, remember they tried to move some of these cases into federal court And some of the people that she was prosecuting didn't manage to move them into federal court. And in the course of that, state officials like her and people who work for her took actions in federal court. So they could trump up, and I use the expression, the pun intentionally, they could trump up that she committed some federal crime, she made some federal statement. You know, a lot of our perjury prosecutions in federal court are based on the fact that someone lied on some form. So Trump will be in a tit-for-tat war with her and her office. And you just, stay tuned.
A question from James Watson. Can Jack Smith release all of the evidence in the Docs case before he resigns?
Very good question. Some of it may be national security, and so it will be covered by the general provisions that you can't release national security. It would be farcical if Trump could take those documents down to Mar-a-Lago, documents that should never see the light of day because they show how we might attack Iran if we got into that situation, how we're countering Russia on various things that Russia's doing. And then because Trump, in my opinion, still took them unlawfully, didn't give them back, lied about them. If somehow they then got released in Jack Smith's report, that would be completely circular and inappropriate. So that's not going to happen. But as to things that aren't national security, he has a duty to release a report. This is not something he's doing vindictive or because he's a deep state guy who's mad about the fact that Trump won. He has a duty to write a report. You'll remember that Mueller wrote a report, then it had that executive summary that was twisted and was different from what the report actually said, that was prepared by Barr, and he put that out before Barr put the report out. But Mueller wrote an extensive report. You could buy a book. It was interesting if you waded through it. And Jack Smith will put out a report both about what happened at Mar-a-Lago, and he'll put out a report about January 6th, the two cases that he investigated. And it'll be depressing reading. It'll be a little bit like the Jan 6 report, but it'll have a lot more detail in there. Some grand jury testimony is not disclosable, and so don't expect grand jury stuff. Don't expect national secrecy stuff. But it'll give Trump a slow or rapid burn. It'll be things that Trump and his minions will hate to see because it will explain in detail, as he has a duty to make that report. But the prosecution trying to put people in jail, that's over. And I wondered a little bit about the two other people who aren't now going to be president, who were charged down in Mar-a-Lago. But it looks like he's just going to give up on that case, and he's not going to fight about whether he was properly appointed or not. And if he doesn't fight about that, the ruling by Judge Cannon is that he was not technically properly appointed, and therefore he doesn't have the authority to prosecute those two, those two aides to Trump down there at the Mar-a-Lago property.
Yeah, who moved the documents? Yeah. This is Miracle Seeker says, hey, Trump claimed he declassified the documents. So that isn't an issue, right? You can, you're saying,
he had a dream. He had a dream like Joseph. He had a dream like Joseph in the Old Testament. And in that dream, he declassified them. And whatever goes through Trump's mind and whatever goes through one of his dreams is supposedly declassification. He never declassified them in any meaningful way. And so they're not declassified. Now, day one of his new presidency, could he declassify them? Sure. He'll play all those games, Mark. Yeah,
there are a lot of games being played. There is, I'm just looking at a couple of interesting questions. Here's one from No Contendo on the Teixeira sentencing, 15 years for the kid who disclosed, as you know, top secret information. He was just sentenced this week. And 200 on Julian Assange. Now, I don't know that they were talking about 200 years for Julian Assange. I don't know, but I certainly did put Julian Assange through it. There is sort of an asymmetry between some of these cases and the sentences that they draw. Isn't that the case, David?
Well, maybe once a federal prosecutor, always a federal prosecutor. But I tend to look at the idea that, you can't declassify things because you're unhappy about some issue. And I know that some people think it's great that, how do we know about all this huge surveillance of us? How do we know about this enormous surveillance state? Well, we know it from a whistleblower who ever since then, once he got to Russia, seems like he's never going to be able to come back. He paid that price for what's obviously wrong. I mean, it's civil disobedience. But if you're going to engage in civil disobedience, I think you have to pay the price, and it's wrong to declassify these things. And so whether one person got 15 years, whether Assange got too much time. I don't look back favorably on Assange. I know some people see him as nothing but, what a John Paul Zenger,
Yeah, like
one
a
of the
conduit,
great,
right?
right, one of the great, people in the history of the freedom of press and freedom of speech and stuff like that. But you want to talk about Trump? He helped Trump get elected, didn't he, in 2016? So did a lot of other people. And is that glorious? No, that's not glorious. He brought something awful onto America, and now Mr. Awful's back again.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to get into a whole thing on Assange, although it's an interesting conversation because I would say you can argue, and he would argue, or some would argue for him, that he was just a conduit. Like if it was the New York Times and the Pentagon Papers or whatever it might be, they sort of fall into the same category. I mean, when you point to the actual specifics, which are associated with getting Trump elected, it's hard to argue that that was a righteous cause. So I'm kind of with you on that anyway. But again, I don't want to get it. What I would like to just bridge to through Assange or whomever is the pardons that really may be issued in large numbers when Donald Trump gets into office. Now, he could absolutely, David, couldn't he just drench those January 6th guys, all of whom had some kind of jail time that they have served or that they are serving? He could drench them with presidential pardons, could he not?
Absolutely. I think there'll be a lot of controversy. I think what people, people are, rightly so depressed about this result. I've heard some of your guests say that they're still in the fetal position. And I get it. But the reality is, I remember what the world was like in 2018, 2019. Trump had the same trifecta. And now, since then, Trump has, 3 years of federal judges that he's picked. He's picked almost all the judges in the Northern District of Texas, people who are still on X, people who are still with Musk, and I'm getting off of that X. I just got on there by force of habit, and I'm going to get on one of the new sites. I just think that's really something urgent that people ought to do. But now you have to agree to litigation in the Northern District of Texas. If you're on X and you have any dispute with X, you have to bring your suit in the Northern District of Texas. Why is that? Because there are 10 out of 11 Republican judges there. That's the same one that gave us the mifepristone ruling that could apply to women not being able to take that medical abortion drug, which is the way that most women have that procedure. Most women. His ruling there in the Northern District of Texas would have knocked that out. And that is where Musk is making you bring any lawsuit that you have against X if you stay on X, Northern District of Texas. That's not even where he is. He's in a different district in Texas. So he wants to direct all the cases there. So starting with your question about the pardons and all of that, there will be an absolute uproar over all these things. You're not going anywhere. The other podcasts aren't going anywhere. The New York Times, CNN, nobody is going anywhere except reporting day by day, minute by minute, the atrocities, the outrages that Trump has in mind for the country. So the pardons, the first time that a pardon comes up, they're going to go through. They're going to have the person who got beaten. They're going to have the wife come on and say, my husband used to be normal. I used to have a normal relationship with him. Things were good. Now he's really got this brain damage. I'm doing everything I can to take care of him. He was beaten by this man. You can see it on tape here, who Trump's about to give a pardon to. And that will be every single pardon. That will be everything that happens. It's not like the country's going to say, oh, carte blanche, Mr. Trump. Just the opposite. And so, I mean, it's not like I'm forming the resistance. The resistance is all around us. And you can see it just keeps coming and coming. Already, all these groups, I think the Michigan Arab Americans have already said, please forgive us. Please, please forgive us. I don't know what we were thinking. We brought this man who is so awful for a two-state solution. We brought this man who's so awful for the causes. We believe him. We brought him to power. I don't know what we were thinking.
So in addition to so this is interesting because you're essentially saying that the media and by extension the public will blow back on January 6th pardons so vociferously, so angrily that somehow that will get Trump to reconsider. Is that really what we're counting on in regard to that?
Well, just let's take that. Some Congress member in a Republican district, they have these town meetings. Okay, the town meeting will be, I suppose, all of the law enforcement people there who may have previously supported that Republican candidate, saying, "How come you're not doing something about Trump? Why aren't you cutting off the funding? You know what this man is doing, you Republican Congress member of mine? He's giving pardons to people who beat a police officer just like me. He said he was going to help law enforcement. Look at these people who marauded the Capitol. Look at the awful things that they did. If he tries to pardon the people with the 18 or 20-year sentence, those are the ones who sicked these folks on police officers, who sicked them on the Congress people. They'll point out that all the Republicans were there cowering. They'll show that wherever Hawley wants to go in life, Senator Hawley, I think everything that Hawley ever does for the rest of his life there'll be that thing where he's giving that fist to the people that Trump is now talking about pardoning. And so that's all that's all I know about Hawley, except I don't agree with almost any of his votes. But the idea that the chickens are not gonna come home to us, you look at how they made stuff up. You look at how they magnified things against the Biden-Harris administration. What, they think they're gonna get kid gloves? I mean, people are gonna speak the truth to power, Mark, to all these people. I mean, did you go through the list of cabinet appointments besides the two that you mentioned? Tulsi Gabbard. When they mention these names to senators, because some of them got to the senators before they got it from the feed. And there's all these great things with these dumbfounded Republican senators. Like, he picked that person. Oh my God. He picked that person, and over and over it went. If anyone wants to call in and tell us what Tulsi Gabbard has done in her career besides meet with that Assad over in Syria, that entitles her to be the head of 13 national security intelligence agencies, I'd love to hear. And I think the Republican senators would love to hear that. So
she's had a show on Fox News, which
say no more.
Yeah, which is something that Donald Trump values. But you really, in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, I was saying in the last hour, she's had no intelligence experience. I mean, she's going to run these intelligence agencies. These are people, again, who are on TV. And by the way, they're neocons and hawks. So all of you who think that these people are pacifists and they're anti-war, I know Trump ran on an anti-war platform because he was going to stop the funding of the Ukraine war. I mean, which is capitulation probably more than it is anti-war. I mean, the idea somehow that these people are anti-war is ludicrous. Look at them. This is a hawkish crew. Marco Rubio is your Secretary of State. All right, so I just think that there was the BS of winning the presidency, and now you're seeing the reality of who ends up populating that presidential administration. There they are. Thank you, Albert. That is really...
Well, Mark, some people say, well, we're older, we don't get it, young people, and young people are great. We were young people and we were idealistic and everything else. But when you've seen this so many times as you and I have seen it, okay, it is really depressing. I mean, Nixon ran on peace is at hand. Peace is at hand. He was the big peacenik candidate, supposedly. And after Nixon ran on peace is at hand, he kept the war going for years after peace was at hand, so he could run the next time and have Kissinger say, peace is at hand. And so all these phony isolationists, all these phony peaceniks like Trump, it's a big lie. But I'll tell you what I think is going to preserve Ukraine's right to defend itself and Ukraine fighting, even with Trump coming in there. So many of the armaments over there, the munitions, are made by American manufacturers. They're making huge money on this. And while generally I don't like the military-industrial complex, the military-industrial complex is getting fat and happy on all these armaments. And they're going to tell Trump, all this rhetoric is very nice. And we know that you want to have the Moscow Trump, okay? Although you're never going to have it, Trump. Get over it. They're not going to give you the Moscow Trump hotel, okay? So stop kissing the behind of Putin, because this is costing us a lot of money. We're making all these munitions that are going to Ukraine, and we want to keep doing it. Keep the war going. Now, I happen to agree with this one particular war going, because I think Putin is, another Hitler. If he's allowed to march across this part of Europe, he's going to march across even more of Europe. I think the Europeans see it that way, Mark. And so this is not my legal, this is my political opinion. I think the Germans and the others are going to up the amount that they spend with us buying American munitions, I don't think that Ukraine is going to have to sue for peace. And, Putin is he's running out of Russians. Now he has North Koreans. I'm not making this up. It's like Stalin, right? Stalin had to fight World War II with, with soldiers with Asian soldiers. And now Russia is fighting Europe with Asian soldiers from North Korea.
I'm just seeing something on Tulsi Gabbard here. Beach Bum Bob says, Tulsi Gabbard is a 7-year Democratic congressperson and officer in the U.S. Army. This is the person you want to disparage? I'm not disparaging her service. I'm not disparaging the sacrifice she made, and I'm not even disparaging her representation of Hawaii. But she is being put in charge of a massive bureaucracy and the intelligence community, and it would appear that she's met with Assad, she has represented Russian talking points publicly, and it is, I would say, at minimum, something that would put a question mark over that appointment. She is, I think, manifestly ill-equipped to handle the kind of administrative challenge that's associated with the intelligence community. And again, I go back to the fact that I'm not disparaging her Army and military experience. I'm disparaging the appointment based on the fact that she's had no real deep dive into the intelligence community. And you want to put her in charge of the nation's intelligence communities. I just don't think you can do that.
I think you're... Mark, can I say this to your correspondent? And thank you very much for sharing your views with us, and share them more in response to what Mark and I are saying. Kelly would be wonderful in that job. Keep Austin in the government and have Austin, our Secretary of Defense, take that job. Take so many Republicans and Democrats who could do that job. General Mattis, who has tremendous experience. The fact that she has 7 years experience kind of pales in comparison with the people that I just named who have decades of experience. Why not pick one of them? And I think you will want to look very, very closely into what happened with Syria. What were those meetings all about? I don't think anyone has supported that person in Syria except maybe her. Why did she do it? Take a look at any financial entanglements and all that. Do a deep dive, I think, before you defend her. I think the Senate will do an incredibly deep dive into her, and I don't think she's going to make it.
I mean, these confirmation hearings, if they have them, will be revelations to people like Beach Bum Bob, even. I mean, who defend her. I mean, she is... look, she ran for president as a Democrat, and I always thought that she was fairly skilled in handling media, and I think that there's a premium on that amidst these appointments that Donald Trump has made. Beyond that, I just don't see it. And as an apologist for Assad and Putin, I don't get where she jibes with American interests. And again, I don't mean to sound like I'm actually recoiling from, I feel, sort of some of her hawkish tendencies. And you can be hawkish in the way that you capitulate to places like Russia and regimes like in Russia and Syria. I mean, these are against American interests. I'm not suggesting that you raise up arms against them, but I am suggesting that you don't represent them in talking points, either on Fox News Channel or anywhere else. So that's where I am on that. Anything else for David Katz before I excuse the witness? I've had him here for way too long, I mean, beyond his normal commitment to us.
Yeah,
Kim?
can we talk about the sentencing in Trump's New York case? Because it's been delayed again, and I don't know what they're going to do with this at this point.
I think David said that they're going to just keep delaying it. It's not going to happen. Is that what you said, David, or did I read that somewhere else?
I think you might have read that somewhere else, but I have a pretty good take on it because, I'm on these New York stations a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been following it, pretty closely. So the judge was going to rule on Tuesday. And in fact, they were very excited, the Times of London was, about what they thought he was going to rule the next day. So I was on late Monday night. Then on Tuesday, he decided not to actually rule on whether the conviction is good or not. There were two things that were going to happen. He was going to take a look at this issue of presidential immunity. And we just talked about, does it apply to state court? And again, I think logically, while I don't agree with the U.S. Supreme Court's 6-3 decision, it has to logically apply to state court. It doesn't make any sense to say that a former president can be criminally prosecuted in all 50 states and all the cities around the United States. The only thing presidential immunity keeps him immune from is a federal prosecution. By the same token that they thought it would greatly impair our separation of powers if they didn't make the executive that strong, even a former executive, it has to follow in state court. So I think that the judge was going to say that. But then the question is, was this covered by presidential immunity? Because it seemed to be non-official action, which was going to be one of his big issues. This was non-official action. This was paying a porn star to keep her mouth shut before the election. So he wasn't even the president then. So you say, how could it possibly have been a presidential action? What happened while he was president? What happened while he was president was that he had falsified these records, and they were going to show that this was a monthly payment to Michael Cohen. So he met Michael Cohen in the Oval Office in the White House while he was president, and he either paid him by hand or he sent him from the Oval Office a check every month, which were purported legal fees. That was a lie. The jury unanimously found 12-0. The truth was, and Trump knew it, that this was hush money being disguised, being falsified as attorney fees for work that the attorney had never done. It was all a big phony baloney, and that phony baloney went on while he was in the White House. Moreover, he met with Hope Hicks while he was in the White House, and he commented on that. Those two issues came before the jury. And what the U.S. Supreme Court said, and this was wild that Chief Justice Roberts joined this part of the opinion 6-3, was that you can't even mention in a courtroom anything that the president did during the time that the president was president for an ex-president. So therefore, something did come in before the jury that should not have come in. That often happens. The analysis is then called harmless error. In other words, was that a harmless error, or was that an error allowing that little bit that came in before the jury that allegedly was official action while he was president? Was that enough to taint or destroy the entire verdict? And the answer would be no. I think the judge was going to say that even without that, this overwhelming evidence would have been enough to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge would have said, in my opinion, having watched the trial in this jury, the jury would have convicted if they never heard that he wrote some of the checks in the Oval Office, and if they'd never heard about what he said back and forth with Hope Hicks in the Oval Office. Therefore, the conviction stands. That's what I think he was going to rule. Then he was going to, 2 weeks later, move on to the sentencing. It being a valid conviction, what sentence would he give? I think he was going to disappoint all the people who wanted Trump to go to jail or to be on home detention or to have to report to a New York City probation officer while he was the president. He was going to say none of that. And my prediction on Times of London was that he would give him a large fine, say the conviction was good, and then Trump could appeal to fare thee well, including eventually to the U.S. Supreme Court. That I no longer think is going to happen. I think he's going to let the can get kicked down the road until Trump is actually in office. And then he's going to say, come back in 4 years when he's not president anymore, and we'll talk about it some more. And it's going to go bye-bye.
Well, again, see point A then, which is that it's essentially going to get delayed to and evaporate.
Mark, can I ask you one last thing? Do you have a thought on Merrick Garland at this point?
I'm disgusted by Merrick Garland. I am appalled by Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland has let down this country. He may not be patient zero. Patient zero is probably, I would say, patient zero would be Mitch McConnell, because he had the chance to convict Trump in the Senate of the J6 conspiracy and coup, but a coup attempt. But once you get past him and Biden, who chose him, you get to him. And he delayed 2 years, and that 2 years really might have been the difference between us dealing with Trump today and not. Your thoughts?
Like a huge event. It's a huge event in American history, and there's got to be a bestseller about it. What actually was the thinking? Someone's going to write it. I doubt it'll be Merrick Garland, but someone's going to write it, I think, fairly promptly, based on alleged inside information of what the calculus was. And I think it has to be that he thought it would really turn us into a banana republic. And Trump's doing that, yeah. Despite what Merrick Garland's delay of 2 years. I think if he was worried about us turning into a banana republic, I can't understand that decision. Or if he really thought the evidence wasn't there until Casey Hutchinson and some of the others showed up in the January 6th committee. I mean, Adam Schiff was the hero. I have to say it now, my friend, the senator elect, but he was the great hero in moving that ball forward. But why Merrick Garland couldn't see that case the way the January 6th committee saw that case? I don't think there was that much new evidence that was really brought out. Yes, there was Casey Hutchinson, a few other details, but I don't know why, if Merrick Garland thought the evidence wasn't there until after he saw all of January 6th, I think the evidence was there. If he was worried about turning us into a banana republic, all he was going to do was appoint a special prosecutor. Then the special prosecutors were going to decide whether the evidence and the facts were there or not. But to take 2 years to appoint, mind-boggling.
I've heard every excuse that, in big investigations like this, they go from bottom up. But the reality is
they weren't going to know about the big people.
That's BS.
The guy who allotted the capital.
RM says, I wouldn't even name my dog Merrick or Garland. I have that much respect for my dog. Yeah, I'm disgusted by Merrick Garland. And, if he does write a book, which he won't, but I hope it's not some apologist book that is written for Merrick Garland, the way that James Comey wrote this book about, well, it was about leading the FBI and his interaction with Trump, but it got to the money, which was, and all people cared about. Why did you release this information that you were reopening the Hillary Clinton investigation 10 days before the election? And then he papered over it with a BS explanation. I put them all in the same horrible category as real blights on American history. So
I think Merrick thought people say I'm Pollyanna. I think Merrick thought he was doing the right thing. And when we know every single fact that happened, I don't think it was for any corrupt purpose at all. I think that it's not the judgment you and I would have.
I completely agree. I don't think he did it out of any sort of with nefarious goals in mind. In fact, Yusuf Gina says, Merrick Garland was a typical Dem. Play nicely and hope the other side returns the favor. Wow, that is a great comment. That's exactly what Democrats do. They play a cage match with the Republicans, but somehow they don't want to really actually throw any haymakers. It's just unbelievable to me, and we are paying the price.
Stay tuned. I think there's a lot of haymakers by Democrats in the future. Stay tuned.
I hope so. Somebody mentioned and I will let you go here, I promise, but somebody said Biden, I thought I put the comment aside. Essentially, they said Dark Brandon was too happy with Trump. I think he knows that there is another shoe to drop. Maybe. I think, honestly, Joe Biden was just doing what he does well, which is try to maintain the institutions of government and a peaceful transition so you look civil with Donald Trump. I wouldn't read too much into his disposition,
Another act by an institutionalist. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. You can find David Katz across the English-speaking world, Fox News Channel, London Radio. I love it. I was going to play some of your London radio stuff today, but we got too far behind. So next time. I love the way they speak with you on those morning shows. David Katz joins us from the United States of America.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yes. David, this is a sticky wicket that Trump has set up. It's all so great.
My father was an immigrant from Nazi Germany by way of England. So he's passed, but he would be happy to.
Yeah, that you're there on the
UK radio. He'd be very happy.
Team UK. All right, David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you, Mark, Jim.
Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.